March 24th. Welcome to another episode of the Almost Daily ZenCast. I'm your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zebo. And this delightful, weird, electronically produced, loopy digital media you're currently absorbing through your ear holes is entitled Jumpy Start the Grave. Sorry, that's a typo. Jumpstart the Grave, not Jumpy Start the Grave. DJ'd for you by the totally literarily fictional character DJ Zed. Welcome to today's episode. Namaste. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your eccentric, weird, literary character as real-life podcast host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, brought to you by the mind of an obscure, has-been known as R.J. Romero. I am here today to continue our conversational exploration of this historical moment we are historically living through. Historically, we are definitely enduring an atypical peak moment. Human history is littered with them. It seems like, as a species, we tend towards protracted periods of a status quo, and then interesting, disruptive periods of disruptive anormality or non-normality. And there's a lot of ways of interpreting it, a lot of ways of perceiving it, a lot of ways of coping with it. But I myself am interested in a holistic sort of approach of clearing the mind so that we may focus on that which could be considered, arguably speaking, slightly more important than some of the local issues people are arguing about. But I could be wrong about that. It's entirely possible. I will concede to you now and throughout the show, dear friends and listeners, it is, I understand, completely and entirely possible that any of the given ingredients or components of my meta-thesis, which drives the way in which I approach my pop cultural analysis of our given moment, our socio-political moment, our historical moment, whatever labels and whatnot, that some of the components of my thesis may in fact be inaccurate and or outright wrong and erroneous. And given that understanding, that I'd neither myself nor do I expect others to blindly assert blind belief in the theory that I'm throwing around. I'm just asking you to entertain the thoughts and ask yourself the same kinds of questions I've been asking myself, and see if we get to wildly divergent conclusions, or if perhaps you can arrive at conclusions similar to my own. But that's a procedural thing, right? It's not like that's got to happen by Tuesday at 2 o'clock or anything like that. So let's zoom out and let's take a gander at some weirdly mind-bendy numbers. And I call them that because we don't contemplate these sorts of things on the daily, right? Except for obsessive-compulsive types that choose an obsession fixated at or near some of this information, which I'm sure there's plenty of. In people that do this, not information. Obviously, there's plenty of information. But generally speaking, on our day-to-day, in both our public discourse and in our own sort of aggregate of our private lives, the collective aggregate of our singular private experiences, it is reasonable to state that these are things that we don't think about too often. And so I humbly encourage you to consider. According to this delightful website known as worldometers.info, which, as you can read for yourself, declares itself a well-trusted and celebrated source for what they're calling live meters. In other words, fact-based estimates. They're not pretending these are hard final numbers. These are live rolling estimates for a series of data points or factoids or interesting metrics of society. Something I'd love to see added to this list is gigabytes of aggregate data, just like data content and information content and art content and all the content that gets posted daily. It now arguably exceeds the data that we created throughout all of history up until a certain point. I forget where the date gets drawn by the scientists who made this estimate, this paradigm estimate, and to give as an example. But we make X amount of data per day, and that in any given day, that is X many times more data than was generated by all of history previous to the year. Let's just arbitrarily say 1994. I forget what year it is, so that's just my own arbitrary pick. But that I want to see that added to this list, is that meter. So, based on various sources, the estimated number of cars produced this year so far, as of right now, Tuesday, March 24th, is 17,873,296,78300. And just it's going up, tick 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 tick. Okay, and that's according to aggregated data that they've tapped into from the following sources: Car Production Statistics, International Organization for Motor Vehicle Manufacturers, Global Auto Report, not Global Auto Repair Report. That was my brain being glitchy. That's presented by Scotia Bank, and Light Vehicle Production Forecasts, produced by IHS. So, that's an interesting number. Why do I decide to call that out? Because because I don't know if this site is bullshit. What if this website is actually Russian disinformation? I don't know. It reads pretty legit, and it seems to line up when I've tried to double check numbers with other forecasty websites, but I haven't done all of them, and I haven't done all of them on a regular. I haven't done any of them more than once. The only ones I actually really hardcore checked was the ones on coronavirus. I looked at this page's coronavirus numbers, and I compared them to the World Health Organization's numbers, and they correlated, although they were slightly different, but they each had different sources, right? So, what are you gonna do? But I wanted to build a little web of number comparison for meta context. So 17,873,539 cars produced this year. It's now at 45. It's at 50, right? Just cranking out cars. Arguably, we could figure out cars off the assembly line average, statistical factual average, by dividing how many units get estimated in a given hour, and do the math. But it's 17 million. I wanted to compare that number with this number. Deaths this year: 13,427,372. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, I don't know. That one doesn't have an expandy, clicky window thing. And neither does the one next to it or below it, deaths today, which is at 60,547, 8, 9, 50, right? They don't indicate their sources, which is a little morbid, but it's a little weird. It's a little creepy for sure. It's a little strange, but all the other ones have this little hashtaggy clicky button thing that you can open up and see where they're getting their data from, the numbers from which they're calculating the fact-based estimate on a day-to-day, so that they can have these things, because they're constantly ticking, right? It's like the national debt clock, or whatever that thing's called, counter. So death this year 13 million, deaths today 60,000. Flip the tab. Coronavirus. This is their special coronavirus page. Last updated March 24th, 2020 at 15:37 GMT. So at some point this morning, or this afternoon, but this afternoon in the future, in GMT time, it got updated. Coronavirus cases, 398,858. Deaths, 17,260. Recovered, 103,748. I think that's total deaths. I do not believe that's deaths in the last 24 hours. We can scroll down to that lovely chart, right? Let's look at yesterday. I did that before. The last time I read from this chart, I was actually looking at yesterday's numbers. Not trying to be out of date, but trying to give you the last whole rounded out. It should be pretty much darn close to the fact, because this is, again, a place that does AI-driven statistical analytics in order to derive these numbers. It's not pretending to know the absolute fact-based numbers. But then again, this sourced from, these guys get their information from the China Health Organization, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Where's the bit where it talks about sourcing? Confirm cases by territory. The time, for instance, the day is reset, midnight GMT, report coronavirus. There's a link to where you can go to report coronavirus. That's great, but I don't want that right now. The new columns for China displays the previous day changes anyways, as it notes in this footnote here, because China reports after the day is over. For all other countries, the new column displays the changes for the current day while still in progress. So they also have a place here where they have latest updates. And here, highlighted in bolded text, is something interesting. Peak number of cases is still 2 to 3 weeks away in New York. Lots of people talking about this. Like, everyone's heard the term, quote, or hashtag flatten the curve. And that's about trying to mitigate how quick the number of transmission per day by everyone immobilizing. And tisk, 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 Trumptopia, a bunch of you were pretty lackadaisical about your state's lockdown order. And also, some states didn't even give one. So, that sort of patchwork approach is going to prove itself ineffective. In order to actually achieve the goal, we would probably want to live under, and I'm not volunteering myself for martial law, by the way. I don't agree with that level of craziness, barring that people start getting redonkadonk violent for reals out on the streets, which tisk tisk on you for even considering it. You shouldn't. That's what they want. Why do you guys think I read that warning so often on the show? The system wants you to get wound up and willing to commit violent acts against the system because you think That's the only way anything's ever going to get done. It wants you to do that. It's prepared for you to do that. They're the ones with all the high-end gear. Duh. Anyways, I digress. So, at the top, back to our, top-down Trumptopia analysis, I reject that Trump is stupid, right? As a viewer, as a non-partisan, I don't support him as a politician, but I also categorically don't support any other politicians. For anyone curious, any new listeners who might be still trying to piece together my worldview, I am categorically sort of, and I hold the nuanced position. Let me put it to you this way. I think that all of politics, as it operates now, is been corrupted, ruined, however you want to put it, hijacked, in order that it actually functions more as a distraction from real, authentic, productive, what I would call civic organization, right? The act of, the actual grassroots, community organizational movement with leadership positions that would be pretty much the same ones we're talking about in the way we run politics. But instead of politics being about power, because power corrupts, right? Why do we endow politicians with power if we already know and understand that power corrupts? Why do we organize things around power then? Why don't we organize things around getting things effing done? Big giant question mark. I digress. I don't remember what I wrote as title for today's episode that I'm currently rambling on. What was it? Today's almost daily ZenCast, brought to you by myself and my own lack of sleep. So there's a lot of things going on right now. Okay, we can get really sidetracked and go down a rabbit hole about ventilators. There's a lot of details there to get wrong, to get right, to misrepresent. If I'm not mistaken, this has been reported in various outlets, up to and including, I think, even Fox News, that Trump has continuously made statements that are technically inaccurate about things that can't really get done at the time frame that he makes it sound like they're going to get done, right? The testing kits. He's been bluffing and bullshitting about the testing kits from day one. Why? One thing I've seen discussed, argued for and against out there on the social media, is that the administration rejected the World Health Organization's testing kits and said, no, thank you, we can develop and deploy our own effectively and efficiently, and then proceeded to bungle and bumble after making sure that local big pharma corporations get set up to be the ones that get the deal. They seemed to sort of also fumble the ball on the way to make the easy touchdown and picked it back up again and fumbled again and, pass it to themselves. It's like we know the game is rigged and we're rigging it for ourselves, in favor of ourselves, but we're also going to do it really badly. There's a lot of ways you can analyze that. But I don't want to get sidetracked. What I wanted to look at were these numbers, right? So, again, for context, this is independent of my critique of Trump's handling of things. For context, the numbers on coronavirus are nowhere near as bad as the death toll for air pollution. And I've been saying this, I've been complaining about air pollution from long before the COVID-19 dilemma, problem started. Although I don't know, I may not have titled an episode about it recently, I most certainly was just, I remember making a post on Facebook, I'm talking about clean air as a human right live on the show right now, hashtag clean air, hashtag human right. Hashtag clean air is a human right, just in case anyone didn't quite understand the point. So we have to step back and question if the numbers are exponentially worse, which can be verified and proven, right? You can look it up. The same World Health Organization that's raising this panicking alarm about COVID-19 is also tracking numbers about people dying from air pollution, and is one of the sources accounted and reflected in the article I recently pulled a number from. That was just a Wikipedia article, right? And the reference pointed to the World Health Organization website for yearly global deaths attributable directly to toxic waste in the air we breathe. That's, for those who haven't heard the number yet, forgive me for those who have, it's redundant, 7 million a year. That's 7 million a year. If you do the math, if I'm not mistaken, is 500,000 a month. Now, how long has this been true? I don't know, but probably most of my entire life. Probably ever since we really got into full swing with the Industrial Revolution, with some mild mitigation and downward trending numbers during the height of the first wave of, clean air activism and anti-pollution activism. But then, varying swells of getting worse and pretending to get better, because pendulum swing theory, bump, insert that right there, right? If you don't know what the pendulum swing theory feature of my meta thesis is, please take a moment to go and listen to did I rename that, or does it still have the old title? I don't know. It's not up in front of me. I should dig it up, but But there's one that I originally, when I posted it, I titled, "Do You Remember My Pendulum Swing Theory?" But there was one other little blurby bit there, but that was like gravy to the sentence. I digress. Go check. There's 2 episodes. One from the very first time I ever talked about it, and then look for pendulum in the keyword or in the description, and check those episodes out. Right, reeling it back in. Where the hell were we? Right. So lots of people throwing a lot of virtue signaling around on the internet. We can both, if I may be so bold as to say, we can do both things. To paraphrase and parrot the president, although about something completely different. I really kind of loathe it when that happens. But then again, that's his genius, right? He wraps up real things that are true and meaningful and actually valuable and worth saying, and uses those to carry the burden of a lot of horseshit and a lot of bullshit, which are 2 different kinds of shit, mind you. And we'll get back to this number thing in just a hot second. But actually, we're just going to go back to it now because I forgot where I was going with all of that. And I'll have to insert complete the thought here later in post because I totally blanked. So numbers, context, relation. It's like, where's the alarm bells for how toxic our entire system has to be? Everything pumping pollution out into the air, whatever that thing may be, we're not holding that entire lump of things accountable. Not nearly enough, despite the fact that we constantly vaguely approach trying to do something about car emissions. And it's, you can praise some states more than you can others for that kind of work. We're doing nowhere near enough, just like we're not doing anywhere near enough to avoid toxifying our oceans to the point of it being deadly to everything and everyone and everything that lives in them, right? Like if we coulda, shoulda, woulda been doing better for as long as we've been aware of the problem, since before I was born, 1976, we wouldn't have a giant floating island of garbage that has been piling on top of itself through the natural eddy and flow of currents that just keeps aggregating more garbage. It keeps picking up more garbage as it circulates in its small little weird swirling path that it's stuck on. It's now bigger than it's bigger, I think, than half of Europe. It's bigger than the state of Texas and 4 other states combined. I think it might be approaching, it's already so big that it can be seen from space. There's satellite photos of it. Look it up. And it's gross. And we are, as a species, we are much more at fault than we dare pretend to acknowledge to ourselves. Inasmuch as that these things were known, understood, and already protested against before I was born, before I got here, right, on this earth. People were already like, why are we doing it this way? This is horrible. This is going to destroy the planet. And we've, for the last 44 years, as a collective species, have just plowed right through those warnings and continue to give zero fucks about our own health, the health of everything else that's alive on the planet, and just have taken a big toxic waste shit dump in Mother Earth's face. For what? For what? For the sake of profit. Legit. To make money. The only reason. If you go through the process of analyzing human behavior just in the last 50 years, and you wonder, like, why have we done the horrible things that we've done? Everything boils down to because it made somebody money. End of story. We've made money more important than our own livelihoods, our own, like, that's a different thing, right? We've made money more, and we've made corporations making money, not even people making money. Look at where we're at. We're being told not to go to work and to deal with it and to hope and pray to the government itself that they're going to send us some relief package, which, and forgive me here, where I get really cynical about politics. This is why I don't agree with anyone who tells me that I'm wrong and that their politician is virtuous and true. I have yet to see any politician actually make a stand strong enough to stop the corporate corruption that gives better social safety, social help. It gives better socialism, to get right to it, to corporations as entities that deserve getting financial aid in epic proportions greater and more helpful to them than real live human beings, and that those real life human beings are given a pittance in comparison and sort of forced to continue to fight amongst themselves to survive. It's truly an oligarchy for the corporate welfare queens that are the too big to fail businesses, and they're piggybacking on what may or may not be Mother Nature's attempt at, like, shocking us into realizing that, you know, our system is fragile, our system is toxic, our system is not helpful the way it works, period. Right? Because there's a lot of theories about what COVID-19 really is. Make sure you check out the Pickle Lane episode if you're new to the show, because I really get at it. But to sum up right now, just in case you aren't going to go there, just think about how diversely weird of a number. I think it's either hit 19 or gone beyond 19 already, of like, okay, there seems to be some movement of some grassroots effort to spread these different, often mutually exclusive or mutually conflicted, mutually denying theories about what COVID-19 really is. Some of them are so sci-fi, it's laughable. Like, I'm a robot from the future sent here to warn you about the robots from the future, right? And I'm telling you that the nanobots theory about COVID-19 is like, okay, you're getting ahead of me. Relax. The robots aren't here yet. But you're steaming your way towards them, and you sure as hell are conditioning yourselves to be ready to just assume that it's real, as opposed to question and not assume right away. Question first and verify that it's real, which is worse, right? Because then they can get you without the robots ever even showing up. But that's a whole different episode. I digress. This whole thing is a crazy mess, and the evidence I see personally, and I don't put it that way to sound better than anybody else. I'm just saying, there's a lot of noise being bandied about, and maybe I'm just more noise. But my lifelong's worth of experience in searching and questioning has led me to this question, these series of unanswered questions. As I said before, I frankly believe it's much more plausible, it's much more realistic, given the way reality actually works, that the disease is not fake, but rather real. The disease is not man-made, but rather some advanced, clever, and I don't want to be accused of, what's that literary phrase when you apply human personification, right? I don't want to be just blatantly dismissed as personifying coronavirus, but I stand firm by my conviction that reality itself, we're disadvantaging ourselves as entities within reality if we insist on buying into the, in my humble opinion, very false assertion that reality is a collection of inert objects, when it is, in fact, consciousness itself, right? That everything in reality is participating in consciousness, and that consciousness is participating in everything in reality. That subatomic procedures, that subatomic particles and procedures therein are all an effect of, a tool of, a direct engagement of consciousness with itself and all the things it has propagated. That being said, it seems, that's my worldview. Asterisk, I understand that categorically I could be wrong, but my lifetime's worth of experience has led me to conclude that, in fact, that worldview is the thing that the system of oppression, which has caused us to just bulldoze through all the good, healthy things we could be doing and continue to profiteer on doing anything and everything that's toxic and worth making money on. That, it's all interconnected, and there's a reason, and that we are indeed here to learn that lesson in a very hard, maybe even painful way. How else do you really learn a lesson? In a materialist world, it's easier to believe that the virus that we identify as COVID-19 is a man-made thing for a man-planned, nefarious plan. I get it. In an esoteric or living fractal holographic universe, those two things reside in a neighborhood of equal plausibility. I'm not saying that it is impossible to believe that this phenomena, this pandemic, might very well be man-made. I do think that there are components of the whole phenomena, the whole experience we're going through, that are in fact getting there because of ego and man choices. Mind as opposed to Mother Nature. The human mind as opposed to Mother Nature. If those are two distinct things. But I think it's infinitely more plausible and believable to investigate and verify first. You don't want to take anything on blind faith, because if you're wrong, and you're going to persist in your blind faithiness until a brick wall splits your skull open. Let's say you really thought you could walk through walls and you had complete blind faith about it. Well, either you would totally be able to instantly walk through walls because of your blind faith, which is a very weirdly self-circular, self-fulfilling thing, which is, unfortunately, cited by multiple sacred texts. But if we live in a materialist world where, according to materialism, that's never possible, then no amount of blind faith will do much, will it? We have to exist in a non- or beyond materialist world, I argue, in order for something like that to be possible. At any rate, my point is, I think it's infinitely more likely that the germ, the bug itself, is just nature, because we've evolved ourselves to a place where we have very few predators. In fact, some who are very, pro-humanist, elitist, as in humans are better than all. I shouldn't have said humanist, but people who are elitist about the human species above all other life forms might arguably say that we have no recognizable predators, and they just dismiss disease, right? It's just a mild technical problem that we will ultimately mitigate through technology. That, dear friends, is hubris. If we presume a materialist assumption, then we can sort of self-rationalize ourselves into a place of where we kind of have invested our belief that that is so. But if we free ourselves of ideology and observe the universe as it actually is, we might come to a completely different conclusion, which I encourage you to consider. And that's that this whole system is driven by various levels, various aggregations, various collections of the same phenomena. I had to pick the right word there. The same phenomena we call consciousness. And thus, anything that is animate and can pursue conscious agendas, as it were, has some, probably difficult to describe and difficult to imagine, but some capacity of consciousness within it. And that then opens the door to, the understanding, I think, I encourage you to consider and question, that it is entirely possible that because we have subjugated our will against all other living beings that could have predated on us, that could have eaten us as food, that then nature has just made us increasingly vulnerable to an ever-growing onslaught of advanced, sophisticated, evolutionarily novel and evolutionarily aggressive little tiny organisms that can be our predator. Why? See, here we get to this fundamental issue of understanding reality as it actually operates versus insisting that reality operate as we would imagine we'd prefer it to operate. Maybe, just maybe, all life must function as food for other life. Perhaps that's some holistic formula in the universe, some, dare I call it, a law in the universe that we, in our hubris, have violated and broken, or thought we, in thinking that we have conquered it, we're now getting, our ass handed to us by an ever-increasing number of diseases that continue to advance in their sophistication because of the biological imperative to fulfill or comply with the law of everything that is alive having something else that can keep it in check. I don't know. Maybe because for millennia, for all of evolutionary time, until we broke free of the passive development and started altering reality with our opposable thumbs and our super big brains so that we could achieve goals, establish comforts, invent things like power and control, and then really harness our brains to really dynamically terraform the planet in a way, that just happens to be proving itself to be really toxic. Really toxic. Not just for ourselves to have done, But the human species is akin to an idiot like myself who continued to smoke cigarettes after having had it really fully, openly, visually explained, like graphically explained how bad smoking cigarettes is and or will be for you, right? Like, I continued to, and though I'm currently not in a lull of like sustaining a sort of status of not smoking, huzzah, not to pat my own back or toot my own horn, I persisted in my irreverent, that isn't even quite right, my disrespectful, my self-disrespect, my self-toxic poisoning, self-poisoning, for all the reasons that we smokers do, right? For all the reasons that we drinkers drink, for all the reasons that we human beings who do dumb, self-harmful things or self-toxic things, we do them, right? If that understanding or that theory there that I've just laid out is true, then we really need to stop wasting time with some of the choices that we're making in the terms of how we come about organizing our civic actions, right? Is that a revolutionary statement about like radically and dynamically changing all of politics? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's just about healing our inner trauma. Maybe it's just about healing the way our minds work a little bit in a way that we've been neglecting. Maybe, just maybe. I don't know. I was going to say something about all these new numbers, but because, trying to stay on top of being aware of the facts and honoring the facts is always important. But I also didn't want to make this show last forever, and it's now at 42 minutes and 24 seconds and beyond. So as of, well, let's look at now. Because yesterday I looked at yesterday. As of right now, currently, in terms of new cases, the United States of America, or as I lovingly call it nowadays, Trumptopia, leads the way. USA is number one in new cases of coronavirus with 4,986 calculated, estimated, based on factual yada yada and AI statistical algorithms cases. And I bet we can go and double check and confirm the number of new cases somewhere else. And I'm sure it's relatively within a similar number. But let's look, and not to be morbid, this is important because, we have to honor those who have died. And stick a pin in this. I got to do a segment talking about how many people believe to this day, right now, that this is fake, that no one's getting sick and no one is dying. I'm never quite clear on how one can cling to such a belief when there's bodies being put, in the ground. I don't understand, but I digress. I guess anything can be faked, so there's always that problem, right? But that's a down that path, paranoia and other forms of madness lie. We'll have to have a deeper discussion about that another day. In terms of new deaths, according to worldometers.info /coronavirus, Spain and Iran and the Netherlands currently lead the way with 385, 122, and 63 new deaths, respectively. Assuming that that's real, right? I always refuse to assume that the most fact-denying conspiracy theory is true, because I myself, for clarity, anybody confused, I don't consider 44444. I don't consider myself a member of the conspiracy theory movement or community. I consider myself a nonpartisan, non-judgmental observer of said community and the content it churns out. I'm a commentator, and not myself a believer in any given thing. I prefer to go directly to real life experience. which is where, if you only look out your window or you only recognize that which you can see directly given your daily movements, you could fall susceptible to the claim, especially ones made with an intricate argument, that this is all a hoax. But also, if you really look at verifying, different eyewitness accounts and other facts, you realize, no, it's not a hoax, but maybe, just maybe, there is a lot of fear-mongering going on around it. And a lot of conspiracy theory agitation. What would you call a psyop where the conspiracy theories are the psyop, right? Like, more than 20 COVID-19 is really conspiracy theories? Like, 3 or 4 different conspiracy theories about what quote-unquote COVID-19 really is plausible to me. Especially if the differences are I don't know how to describe it, reasonable differences. But the fact that there are as many as I've encountered, and most of them seem to come in pairs. In other words, as I've highlighted before, it's a nefarious plan to destroy China's economy. It's a nefarious plan to destroy the United States economy. There doesn't seem to be a movement supporting a nefarious plan to destroy the world economy, which is interesting in and of itself. I digress. So, presuming facts are what this website truly are, as they claim, based on their sources, etc., you can see that, you can see the numbers on a day-to-day, and this is what they plot to generate those curves. It seems like efforts are indeed working, perhaps, right? Because the top 3 for new cases are USA, Spain, and Germany, not Italy, where they've been getting the most hyped focus lately as like the worst epicenter. But already, as other headlines had been predicting in the last 48 hours, USA is excuse me. The USA is at the top of the list of new cases, with the biggest gain a single day. This is now, what was yesterday's? Let's take a look yesterday. Yesterday's new cases, again, USA, Spain, and Italy. Italy has dropped out of the top 3. So perhaps, and I know that this has been reported in other sources, so forgive me. I don't want to sound like I'm just parodying the news. I'm not. I'm being really honest. Like, looking at a source of my own, right? This place claims to be giving us pretty accurate, data-driven numbers. And so it's clear in the 3 days that I've checked it that, like, the tallies have shifted dramatically. And of course, there's different ways you can look at it, right? Total cases all time gives a different picture. Total cases of all time, China, Italy, USA is a low third, with a big gap between USA and Italy, and an even bigger gap between Italy and China. But China, in terms of total new cases, and if you're wondering why, this is where it's interesting, right? Like, China is not in the top 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's not in the top 10 anymore. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. It's not even in the top 20 anymore. It's not on the page. When you sort the column, new cases, largest to smallest. Where is China? Let's see if we can find it. I'm scrolling. China. New cases, under 40. New cases reported, I think this is yesterday, 39. So it's way down here. I wish the column had a ranking number for the thing that you're sorting. But that'd be a lot of, I don't know. I don't know if that's even possible on these kinds of charts. But I digress. It's not in the top 20, right? So their situation has dramatically changed. So if you pay attention to that sort of thing in up close, some of the statements previously reported and made by quote unquote health authorities out there makes a lot of sense. Now, also, is it fair? Is it sane? Is it even reasonable to insist that people avoid going to work while also sort of having the duplicity of lots of people are still going to work, right? That's a whole different discussion. And I guess it is, for many people, contingent on whether or not this disease is even real at all, which is kind of messed up, in my opinion. And then within the realm of it is real, there's a whole bifurcation about whether it's real and the deadliest, scariest thing we've ever seen, or it's real, but it's a man-made thing and part of an agenda. It's real, but it's being way overblown, way overhyped, and it's actually ever so slightly deadlier than the flu. And we don't stop the world for the flu. We mock people who get sick with the flu and tell them that they're weaklings. Right? So I'm gonna leave things there because I've been rambling for way too long already. But I think you get where I'm going. I hope it made sense what I was trying to ask. And the question marks that I think, the media is appropriately trying to warn people because there are lives to be saved. This is a little bit gnarlier than the plain old regular flu. And here's where I think a point could be lost, or a nuance is lost. This is separate from the flu. So the flu is making its rounds, and this is happening on top of that. And this will impact anybody that's already debilitated, has another prior condition, has an age, is of a certain age or older. And if they're already weak because they had the flu or are fighting off the flu and they don't even realize it or whatever, and then this hits them, it's a mess, right? But let's not be naive and foolish enough to get caught up in an argument about what it really is, quote unquote, that we miss the point, which is the learning lesson here is our system of society is toxic, it's fragile, it can be disrupted by something that goes wrong with man-made stuff or something that Mother Nature, blindsides us with. And we shouldn't be so naive as to think that no government would never do this and that Mother Nature couldn't outdo whatever any government could. Because let me lay it down for you right now. My understanding of Mother Nature is that she very well can and might very well indeed do so. Right? And that position is not something we should laugh and mock and marginalize. Because if we ignore it and it turns out to be true, woe is us all. We will rue the day that we chose to continue to neglect Mother Nature as she comes to her phoenix resurrection, which is what the esoteric community is talking about, right? Anybody who describes themselves as spiritual is at least familiar with the idea that Goddess is rising. And that's what I bring to, I'm trying to help bring to the foreground in terms of public discourse. As always, friends, thank you for listening. If you've got questions, if you're confused, if you've got opinions, if you think I'm right, if you think I'm wrong, if you're indifferent and you want me to talk about sports, I don't care. Bring it. Bring it to my social media. Bring it to the Sprecher.com page, Sprecher.com/show/ZenCast. It used to be a way longer, more complicated link to my show's profile page on Sprecher. I recently edited it so that it was easier to hand out, both visually and vis-a-vis the spoken word. As always, thanks for tuning in. Here's that second half of Jumpstart the Grave, a digitally produced bit of fictional DJ music created just for your listening ears by one of my literary alter egos, DJ Zed. Original founder of Purple Mush and the Political Outrage. And stay tuned. They're working on their own thing as a sidebar project, and they'll be back once they master, because they want to separate themselves from this EDM sound that DJ Zed is so into. But I digress. I'm sometimes make myself giggle when I improvise like literary fictional thing character stuff for the podcast. At any rate, I have been rambling at you for way too long. As always, thanks for listening. Here's the closing bit of music. Stay tuned for more, because I got more things to say. Stuck at home, folks, make the time to meditate. If you've already meditated, double down, dig deeper, meditate a new way, try a different style, explore a different format. If you're already on the verge of transcendence and about to become an enlightened being, let us know. Stay tuned for more. As always, namaste, and may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.